All right, get in here. It is a day where we talk about the big stories of the week. The band PUP has a new album today. I want to get into that. I also think it's a good reason to talk about what Canadian punk has given us. And I'm still thinking about Mark Carney being a big fan of Down with Webster. The group chat is here. Let's get into it. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, why don't we just kick things off with an album that is out today that, I gotta tell you, we are incredibly excited about.
It took me a while to let it sink in. The way that you never say what you're really thinking. It took me a while to find out. I keep fighting the feeling, and once again, I've been lucid dreaming.
That is Toronto punk band PUP with Holloways. They've got a new album. It is called Who Will Look After the Dogs? I mean, look, they're called PUP, but they're not young. They've been around for a while. They have won Junos. This is their 5th album. And it is one of those records that leans into the question of aging and raging gracefully in punk. Niko Stratis is here. Emilie Hanskamp is here. Rollie Pemberton is here. Hello to all of you. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello. What a delight. I'm so happy that you're all here. Emilie, I'm going to start with you. PUP are one of those bands that just seem to get gradually more and more popular with each record. Next week, they head out on this big European tour, playing 5, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 homecoming shows in Toronto in July. You're a longtime PUP fan. What got you into them?
Well, I'm from Montreal. I moved here about 9-ish years ago and, had my own insular scene thing going on here. And then I didn't know who PUP was. And I moved here, was introduced to them. And, at a time, still we're dealing with a problem where you kind of try to divorce yourself from your inner Canadiana. And I was introduced to this hyper-local, super popular, beloved band, went to a show, almost got absolutely annihilated in the pit and fell in love with them.
Yeah.
Fell in love with the self-deprecation, the self-awareness, the sharpness of that self-awareness. And I think we'll talk about their evolution a little later, but, they haven't changed in that way, which is why I've stayed with them. They're about my age, mid-30s, and we've evolved kind of together in this really comforting and cathartic way that I just admire and love that they've stayed true to that through and through.
2 things. One, people from Montreal never miss an opportunity to let you know that they're from Montreal, and I just want to admire the dedication to that.
I promise it's not the only time it's going to happen.
And 2, who does not try to divorce themselves from their inner Canadiana is Niko Stratis. I think she has an Edmund record, the Edmund Fitzgerald tattoo on your body. Is that correct?
It's a full back piece.
Show us.
Yeah, it's a full. You see the ship slowly sinks down.
This is a derailment, and I'm going to get back to PUP. Okay, so the band has been at it for a long time, over a decade. They build this incredibly loyal following, and they have this really high, intense, high-energy music. But after hearing this new record, how would you say they've evolved, Niko?
Well, I'm from the Yukon. I feel like we're just going around and talking about where we're from. But
sure are.
I was a punk rock kid, and I grew up with sort of a lot of what we would consider to be a Southern California sort of skate punk style. And when I was a kid, I never expected this music will grow up with me. As I age, this music will age, and it will still mean something to me as I get older. I just never really expected that was going to happen. And to my surprise, in my adult years, it has kind of happened. And PUP is one of those bands that is really doing that, right? It is very much like you were saying, they are evolving not just sonically, but also, in their songwriting. How are they approaching, talking about the mental health and the self-deprecating and all that? Even that sort of evolves as you get older and as you have a deeper understanding of the self. And it's not a thing, you don't really grow old in punk rock. That was never supposed to be a thing. So it is interesting now to be old and be like, oh, this music can still be for me. Even though, it is still very youthful. It is still very loud and fast and angry. We can still be loud and fast and angry and be older and still have concerns and worries. And it is a really beautiful, fun thing. It is both sad and also about Olive Garden. It's perfect.
Literally, there's a song
I love Nihilism
you
can dance to.
The best kind.
Nihilism you can dance to should actually be the blurb they put on the cover of this album.
Yeah.
Rollie, let me first of all just say you're from Edmonton, so you don't have to say it. And then just get to straight into this record. So when you wake up this morning and hear this new record that just dropped, what do you think of it?
I feel like it brought me to this really nostalgic place of when I was in high school, junior high, listening to Weezer.
Ah.
They brought that feeling back, that Blue Album feeling.
Yeah.
And I just love PUP so much. I mean, like they are homies, but I really respect what they've cultivated, the fan base they've cultivated. I love the kind of self-deprecating edge to a lot of Stefan's lyrics. And I love the Olive Garden promotion.
Okay, I think the idea of talking about nihilism you can dance to, let's hear a little bit more from this record.
The best revenge is living well. I've been living like shit. It's been f***ing up my sleep. The best revenge is living well. Didn't even know what was right in front of me.
There is something comforting about that, right? So that's how the song's called Best Revenge. It's from this new PUP album, Who Will Look After the Dogs. Emily, you said this is your favorite track
Absolutely.
off this album. You can just imagine a room full of people in despair, but also sharing that despair together because it's so kind of anthemic.
I can't wait. I'm actually coincidentally going to be in Madrid when they're performing in a few weeks. One, I can't wait for them to yell the words Don Valley Parkway in Madrid and see what happens. But I also can't wait to scream, sing this PUP. This is the most Puppian chorus in the world, and is why I love them. And also, like what Niko was saying in terms of that evolution, like so much has happened leading up to this album. One of them's a dad, one of them's gotten married, another one's like settling into a new home. You have, Stefan, who has a dissolution of this like decades-long relationship and is taking stock of his life. And I think evolution doesn't always have to mean, yes, we want our punkers to grow up, but it doesn't mean out goes the angst, uncertainty of your life. It means, how am I engaging with these things? And I think we hear the evolution in this album where sometimes you do just want to look at your life and be like, it sucks right now. The problem, that self-awareness shifts. Maybe that problem is now me. Let's scream about it and let's push back at these like therapy speak mantras. Stefan's so good at that.
Yeah.
The best of life is living well. Well, my life sucks right now. Or like another song, when one door closes, another opens. He says, when one door closes, maybe there's no other doors. And I love that that Puppian approach to just catharsis. They do that so well, and that evolution is clear here too.
Niko, when Emily said one of them got married, one of them became a dad, I was like, this is like the brotherhood of the traveling pants. Like that's what I'm hearing. Sort of like this idea of there's something about growing together, and then as you grow together, you sort of figure out your way through life, and like the band becomes the vehicle for doing that.
Yeah, sure. I just sort of imagining the remake of the Brotherhood of the Traveling Pants, but it's all the members. It's just the members of PUP.
Yeah,
and Jeff Rosenstock, just to sort of round out the cast a little bit. I do think it is like, I really like this idea of like, you don't put away these ideas, right? You just sort of have to reassess them as you get older. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And I also think that, like, I did call it nihilism to dance to, but I do think that there is a lot of active caring about something. This is a band that is like, that always sort of puts the things that they stand for and care for on display. They have a trans flag on stage, which I always appreciate. But like, I know a lot of people like to see these things and like to see a band that is sure crumbling and falling apart, but is also like, we still care, we still stand for something.
Yeah. Can I ask you about Stefan Babcock's approach to mental health? Because like we sort of referenced this idea of PUP being a band that's very forward about saying, hey, I'm having a really hard time right now. What do you think makes him such a good spokesperson for this issue?
He doesn't feel forced. Like, I think a lot of it, I worry sometimes, you're talking about the therapy speak of it all. And I do think that, look, we have sort of like turned mental health into a product you can easily sell. Everybody is like, oh, I'm so honest and I'm so open and I'm so approachable as a songwriter. And so easily that becomes a product. And you can see the sheen on it, right?
Yeah.
You can see it on the shelf wrapped in plastic. And I think with him, because it does feel very scrappy and earnest, and it is always sort of feels like emotions tumbling down a hill trying to hold on. And for me, a person that is often depressed, who has struggled a lot with like suicidal ideation and all these ideas a lot in my life, even now as a full adult who is like a lot of good things going for me, I still have these problems. And it feels very real. It feels very tangible, for lack of a better word, of like, right, I understand this because there's a texture in it that I know because it feels true to me. And I think that is true for a lot of people. And I think it speaks to the lines I see every time they play a show, because a lot of people share that same texture.
Rollie, I mentioned that the PUP are playing those 5 shows in Toronto this summer. You are opening one of them. You're opening July 18th at Danforth Music Hall. Let's talk about the fact that they sort of like have used their shows quite often as like these platforms to go like, hey, you got to meet our friend. You got to meet our friend and listen to them because like they mean something to us. But before we move on, just talk to me about the importance of PUP in the larger sort of Canadian music ecosystem.
Yeah, PUP, they're one of those bands that at first, like, you start seeing them blowing up and you're like, wow, I'm surprised that they're Canadian.
Yes.
Surprised, like, they're that kind of band. Like, they're
Yeah.
just popping.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the connection they've cultivated with their audience. They've been grinding, and you feel like they're progressively getting bigger and bigger, and just they keep tying into that emotional connection with their fans. And I feel like they're just best practices for a band in 2025. I feel like they use their platform probably better than most bands out there. Like, they're putting up the trans flag, having really diverse artists opening for them. Like, they got me, Snotty Nose Rez Kids doing their whole tour.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have to do any of that. That's something like I just really want to point out. Like, they make a conscious decision to platform other people than themselves, and I think it's a really special thing.
Before we just pivot from this topic, I just want to tell you that Stefan Babcock from PUP is going to be sitting down with our pal Tom Power. That's going to come out on May 13th. What was interesting is that both Rollie and Emilie mentioned the idea that, like, hey, Canadian bands, we don't spend a lot of time with them, and that immediately makes me think the fact that we wouldn't have PUP if it wasn't for this.
Cause I'm in too deep and I'm trying to keep up above in my head instead of going under. Cause I'm in too deep and I'm trying to keep up above in my head instead of going under.
From 2001, that is In Too Deep, Sum 41. Look, PUP would have grown up idolizing these guys. PUP were invited to actually open for Sum 41 on their farewell tour, which was this year. Look, Sum 41 retired earlier this year, which is a strange sentence to say out loud, because that retirement has also kind of triggered this additional wave of nostalgia, I think, in just reflecting on that moment of Canadian pop punk. That wave of nostalgia is still happening. Avril Lavigne is about to kick off a greatest hits tour in Moncton. Simple Plan, Fifi Dobson are going to be there. Next month, music journalists Adam Feibel and Matt Bobkin are going to release their book called In Too Deep: When Canadian Punks Took Over the World. So clearly that Y2K Canadian pop punk moment, like we are looking back at it as though it was like this gigantic kind of like classic rock moment. Emilie, I'm going to ask you about this because we are the people, pal. Like, we were sort of squarely in that demographic when this started blowing up. What did it mean to you growing up?
I just want to shout out Adam and Matt's book. I started reading it. It's great because I feel like we often talk about these like CBGB, New York, London, SoCal punk scenes. In Toronto, we have such a rich history, recent and past. So really excited to dig into that. But yes, I'm not going to look at Niko when I say what I'm about to say. But for me, being a suburban, I'm sorry, Montrealer, I'm sorry, the locator, but at the time, and having Simple Plan come out, like Pierre Bouvier was the name of this lead singer singing about his angst with his parents and his schoolmates.
I'm just a kid and my life's a nightmare.
I'm just a kid. I remember sitting with my, I can't look at Niko. I remember sitting with my lyric sheet, replaying I'm Just a Kid, learning that song intentionally by heart. As a Much Music kid also, like, I didn't necessarily have the accessibility to punk music at that time. This was my gateway in. Like, something like the In Too Deep video when Dave Baksh like comes out of the pool ripping that guitar. That's my Canadian heritage moment. It had such an impact on me. And again, that accessibility as a way into this music and that catharsis it's like immeasurable, the impact that it had on me and like so many people of our generation.
Now I'm going to look at Niko because she can actually look at me at least.
All eyes on me, apparently. Yeah.
But let me ask you this, because like that Canadian punk moment was a transformative moment for punk in general.
Sure.
Why do you think we made such an impact?
Because it was early internet. A lot of things were starting to happen. I think a lot of this, we were talking about this earlier even before we started recording, but a lot of this really hinges on Avril Lavigne and the Avril Lavigne moment, right? Because when Avril Lavigne became a massive pop star very, very quickly, this conversation on what is pop and what is pop and what is punk started to shift a little bit because of her and because the conversation about her, that she wasn't herself always actively happening. Sum 41 was already on the scene at the time. We had other Canadian punk bands, Gob from OS, from Vancouver, from BC. They were a big band. They were a big band for me when I was younger because I just grew up in a different punk rock scene. But these things started to blow up and they started to become pop, and then started to become popular. And when something becomes popular, you also can't divorce it from the rise of like Blink-182 and bands like that. And when all these things started to become massive properties that labels were looking for because they knew they could capitalize on this investment, they started to look for what else could they bring up. And sure, I have complicated ideas about what is punk and what is not, but I'm also very glad that people have these inroads because it does allow them, a road in. And it does also get you, like, you get to feel like, I'm from Montreal. I don't know if you've mentioned it.
Listen.
But, but this idea of like, I'm from Montreal and so is this band and they're big and everybody knows the words to these songs. That is a great thing that people should get to have.
Rollie, when you think about this moment of nostalgia that we're having for for Canadian pop punk and Fifi Dobson and Avril and Simple Plan and all those bands that sort of took up that space. You mentioned Gob earlier. There is something about the fact that this music seems to be engineered for people in their teenage years. When you think you reach, the age that you and I are at, how does this stuff land for you?
Yeah, I feel like these things go in waves, and I feel like we're coming up on a bit of a critical reassessment of this particular style of music. I feel like I think back to going to Edgefest as a kid. That was a big thing for me, going and seeing like Treble Charger and Sum 41 and being like, wow, they're Canadian. I can't believe this. But yeah, even moments like the Sum 41 video, Makes No Difference, and they had DMX come out on the moped. Like I was like, wow, this is really legit.
Yeah, the idea of a critical reassessment of that period of time, I think like there will be people who maybe bristle at that idea. The idea that you go back and you reassess and say like we were not fair to that period of time, and that's part of sort of like the poptimism conversation in general. Revisiting how we were not fair to '90s pop and say no, there is a lot of critical value here, or there's joy to be found here. How dare we sort of like dismiss this? Is that what's happening now with Canadian pop punk, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are revisiting that. And I think that at the same time, what's happening is as we're revisiting Canadian pop punk, we're also revisiting the history of some of the more problematic aspects that came with, right? And I think what comes to mind for me is, it's 2008, 2009. I'm in a unfortunately named festival, Virgin Fest. Headley's performing, I'm walking around, and, all of a sudden Jacob Hodard's there, and he kind of falls on me inebriated, and it was this moment of me of this delineation of like these personas there isn't necessarily a delineation between the persona and the person. And I think as we were revisiting this Canadian pop punk conversation, part of what we're also revisiting is this idea of like there are problematic aspects to this as well that we don't necessarily have to take with us along with this nostalgia that we're kind of leading into and adoring, right?
Yeah, I mean the Jacob Hodard story, just quickly, like former lead singer of Headley, currently serving a 5-year sentence for sexual assault. There's also the story of, we talk about the sort of Sum 41 revival, but Derek Whibley did accuse Sum 41's former manager, Greg Nuri, of grooming him. Nuri suing him for libel. How do those stories, you think, affect the way that you look back at that time period?
Yeah, I mean, I think I jumped the gun a little bit there, but that's sort of when you're asking me the question of when we reflect back, I can't help but do that with this in the same hand because it isn't all positive, right? And like in the book that you mentioned, Adam and Matt's book, there's a point where they talk about how Sum 41, they were talking about this legacy where they'd kind of leave a path of destruction in their wake, trashing hotel rooms and all that. And at one point, the Def Jam president told them like, no problem, destroy everything. We've got the budget. Just get it on tape. And I think when you hear a story like that, and then you think about Derek Whibley's experience and what he has since so bravely come forward to reveal like the other side of that experience, we cannot divorce ourselves from that part of this reality of like there was permissiveness there. And we don't have to take with us those archaic ideas that is necessary for that kind of music and that scene. So happy to see the survival of pop punk, happy to see that kind of continue, but let's leave behind while take accountability for the problems we don't want to bring with us going forward.
I think the reason the book is great is because it doesn't shy away from that. So it sort of still spends a bit of time saying, not everything that happened in this time period was good, even though Canadian punks were sort of on top of the world. If you're just joining us, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion, and we are talking about punk right now. But we're going to pivot a little bit because I want to play you guys our new national anthem. That is Canada's own Down with Webster. That is from 2009, my dudes. Also known as the song. Niko, pull it together. That is one of the songs that had Prime Minister Mark Carney
Get your
wilding
W's
out.
up, Niko. Get your W's
let's go.
up.
Shall we do that? No, at least Rollie's doing it. Look, Mark Carney, new Prime Minister, was wilding out on the dance floor, and Down with Webster performed at his election after party on Monday night. Yesterday on Commotion, on the show, we talked to Down with Webster's Tyler Arms about what it was like to be in the room that night. But I want to know how that moment looked to each one of you. So we're going to go real quick around the table. Niko, you see these videos of Carney, dancing. He knows every single word to "Woe is me."
He sure does.
What's your reaction?
Oh, I don't know if we're early enough in the regime yet for me to know if I'm allowed to criticize on it. I'm just sick of having every election cycle have to feature one old white guy dancing,
Well, but this seemed genuine to me. Like, Rollie, I gotta say, as far as bands go, there's this tendency to go, there are people who research and go, hey, if you dance to this band, you're really cool. And I don't think Down with Webster is in that category. I really don't, because I haven't had a moment in a while. And so, this seemed like it was this is organically this politician's favorite band, and he just wants them there. Was that your read too?
Yeah, it felt really authentic because, who would randomly select this Down with Webster? I think it's kind of endearing.
Yeah.
I love a world leader who's down to get silly. So hey, what's not to like?
We do this thing every once in a while, Emily, where we go, politicians, they do this thing where they pick a pop star or a hip hop star and they go, that guy's my friend. Tony Blair did it a little bit with the Gallaghers in the 1990s. Obama did it with Kendrick. Trudeau, famously good friends with the Tragically Hip folks. Kamala Harris did it a little bit with Beyonce. When we think about Mark Carney and Down with Webster, it does feel like a bit of a random combination of a politician and a rock band. Do you think this is is there strategy going on here?
I think the randomness is why it works. Do I believe Barack Obama, if you pass him the aux, is playing 365 by Charlie XCX? Absolutely not. Do I believe that this former central banker gets down to early odds rap rock? I do. Because if you were going to strategically choose a quote unquote cooler, no disrespect to Down with Webster, love ya. But if you were going to, you wouldn't have chosen this band. It's real, and it's, sorry to use the buzzword of authentic. It is authentic, and that's why I'm endeared to it. In spite of myself, when I see him put that W up, I also learned from my prime minister that there was a W sign for Down with Webster. So I'm sorry, color me endeared.
First of all, I can't believe I'm the only one on this table who's seen a Down with Webster show. I cannot tell. I would have thought at least one of you.
I'm not surprised to hear
would
this.
have thought. Okay, yeah.
Surprising.
Yeah, listen, I went to Queen's University in 2009. What do you want from me? Down with Webster, we're around, and it was a great time, and it was a party. Niko, let me ask you this.
Yes.
Do you buy when you get Obama's list of here's all the songs I'm listening to?
Yeah.
Do you go Obama spends his Thursdays listening to Doechii? You think that's real?
No. No. I mean,
yeah.
Everybody knows that is a list compiled by a bunch of people sitting around in a room being like, what are we going to make it seem like the president is reading and listening to?
You don't think he listens to those songs?
I would love to see Obama's running mix. Because I think the running mix is everybody's purest form of what they're putting on playlists.
So
but I don't think that's a real. I don't think Obama is really listening to every song that he's listed there.
Emily, when Niko says that, what is she reacting to? What is the test of authenticity there?
The test of authenticity is just I think you look at a playlist like Obama's playlist, not to get into that, for example, but it's so perfectly from every genre and every moment. It's like no one is like that. It's too good. It's too clean. Good music taste isn't clean, in my opinion.
Can't relate.
It is
My
messy,
taste is
random,
perfect.
and a little cringe. Other than yours, Elamin. Yeah.
Okay, I got to leave it there, but this has been a wonderfully and delightfully messy chat. This has been the best time. Thank you for being here. You guys are the best. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Emilie Hanskamp is a freelance music journalist, also in Toronto. Niko Stratis, culture writer in Toronto, regular right here on Commotion. Her debut book, The Dad Rock That Made Me a Woman, is out next week. That is the same day you'll be right back on the show to tell us about it, by the way. I'm really excited to have you. And Rollie Pemberton is a writer and rapper, also known as Cadence Weapon. He was in Hamilton. That is it for the show today. By the way, I should tell you, Commotion was produced by Stuart Berman, Ty Callender, Gene Kim, Jane Van Couverton, and Jess Lowe. Our digital producers are Carla Antonio, Amelia Ekbal, Shuli Grossman-Gray, and Julia Whalen. Our director today is Gene Kim. Our engineers this week are Dave Modi and Sam Hashmi. The senior producers this week are Danielle Grogan and John Perry. Our executive producer, Beza Seifa. Me, I'm just some guy, man. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. See you next week.